The people behind Stalin were the members of the so-called New Elite or Nomenklatura. These people held key administrative positions in all spheres of activity: government, industry, agriculture, and education, and their positions were granted only with the approval of the Communist Party of each country or region. This new elite may be compared to the Western establishment in its holding or controlling of both private and public powers. And at the top of the new elite was Stalin's inner circle, made up of Georgy Malenkov was a prominent Soviet statesman and Communist Party official and a close collaborator of Stalin. He joined the Red Army during the Civil War and carried out the Great Party Purge of the late 1930s. During World War II, he served on the State Defense Committee, otherwise known as the GKO or the Inner Politburo, a small group which directed Soviet war effort. After Stalin's death, he assumed post as senior party secretary as well as chairman of the Council of Ministers, but did not denounce Stalin's reign, ultimately leading to his political downfall. He ultimately had to yield his party post to Khrushchev and was forced to resign as minister in 1955.
Kliment Voroshilov was a military and political leader of the Soviet Union who served as head of state after the death of Stalin. He was a Bolshevik activist from 1903 and participated in the Civil War. Because of this, Stalin made him People's Commissar for Defense. He also became a member of the Politburo of the party's Central Committee, as well as being named a Marshal of the Soviet Union. He was held responsible for Soviet defeats in World War II, and was removed from his post as Defense Commissar. But he then joined the Committee for State Defense, in which he assumed all powers of government after the Germans invaded the Soviet Union. Acting as Stalin's representative, he supervised the establishment of the communist regime in Hungary, but by 1953 he had fallen into Stalin's disfavor. Stalin died, however, in the same year, and Voroshilov became the chairman of the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet.
Zadornov was known as the unofficial Tsar of culture. He began as a member of the Bolsheviks from 1915. He rose to the ranks after the October Revolution of 1917. As a close associate of Stalin, he reached the peak of his career after World War II. As a full member of the Politburo starting from 1939, he began to severely tighten his ideological guidelines for post-war cultural activities. This led to him overseeing the founding of the International Soviet Propaganda Arm, the Cominform, short for Communist Information Bureau.
Alexander Poskarbyshev is known as the Secretary of the Special Sector. He moved to Moscow in 1922 within the Central Committee of the CPSU, and by 1923 he had become the director of the Administrative Bureau of the Committee. From 1924 onward, he worked with Stalin when he was assigned to the Kremlin. He became the administrative succession of the Central Committee shortly thereafter. On March 10th of 1934, Poskarbyshev became the chief of the Special Section. In 1935, he became the director of administration of the General Secretary of Central Committee of the CPSU. He wrote two texts called The Constitution of the Soviet Union in 1936 and The Short Course of CPSU History in 1938, which were both based on Stalin's theories. During World War II, Poskarbyshev worked with Stalin in Moscow planning military operations.
Leventry Beria joined the Bolshevik wing of the Communist Party while in school. He was active in the counterintelligence region of Georgia, Stalin's native region, during the revolution, and in 1912 was tapped to join the Cheka. He quickly became known for the violent methods he used against enemies of the state. He also maneuvered Georgia to succumb to centralized Bolshevik control, and rose to the position of chairman of the People's Commissariat of Internal Affairs, otherwise known as the NKVD. He ingratiated himself with Stalin by penning a propagandist treatise that fostered Stalin's reputation in the region. Eventually, he also became leader of the NKVD and assisted Stalin in carrying out military purges during World War II. In 1914, Stalin appointed him deputy prime minister, and he joined the Politburo. However, after Stalin's death, he denounced Stalin's regime, and ultimately the other members of Stalin's inner circle had him executed.
Nikita Khrushchev is known as the enforcer for Stalin. In 1918, he became a member of the Bolshevik Party. Hussein came to the notice of Joseph Stalin's close associate Kayla, who asked Khrushchev to accompany him as a non-voting delegate to the 14th Party Congress in Moscow. After 4 years, he was then appointed secretary of the Academy's Party Committee. He was one of 3 provincial secretaries who survived the mass executions of the Great Purge in the 1930s because he participated in the purges of party leadership for Stalin. In 1949, he was appointed secretary of the Central Committee of the CPSU. After Stalin's death in March of 1953, he engaged in power struggle with Malenkov, who was Stalin's heir apparent. In March of 1953, he replaced Malenkov as the first secretary. In 1955, removed Malenkov from the premiership in favor of Marshal Bulganin.
Vyacheslav Mikhailovich Molotov was a statesman and diplomat who was foreign minister and major spokesman for the USSR and Allied conferences during and after World War II. Known for his diplomacy, Molotov helped create the Soviet alliances in the United Nations. He was a member of the Bolshevik Party from 1906 and supported Joseph Stalin after the death of Lenin. He controlled the Moscow Party Committee and was chairman of the Council of People's Commissars. He was picked by Stalin to become the Soviet Commissar of Foreign Affairs in 1939. In his wartime dealings with allies, he earned a reputation for uncompromising hostility. For example, he ordered the production of bottles of flammable liquid, later known as Molotov cocktails. He briefly gave up the post of foreign minister, but after Stalin died, he resumed it until 1956.
Lazar Kaganovich was a commissar of industry. As one of Stalin's most loyal associates, he rose to become a member of the Politburo and the Presidium of the CPSU. Stalin used Kaganovich to implement some of his more inhumane and catastrophic policies, such as collectivization and the rapid industrialization of the 1930s. Kaganovich played a role in enforcing the policies that led to the Holodomor, or known as the Ukrainian famine, which resulted in Stalin's attempt to force Ukraine under Soviet control.